Welcome, friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. Welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this little old cookbook sent in by a viewer. Thank you very much for sending these in. Called the Chester Cookbook. This is a community cookbook from Chester, Iowa, published in 1922. It seems like a fundraising cookbook compiled by its members for the benefit of the Chester Hill Cemetery Association. I guess to raise money to keep the cemeteries cleaned up and taken care of. We're going to do a recipe called Spanish steak. Mostly because I was feeling a little nostalgic. I saw the recipe and it's like, when I was a little kid, we ate this probably a couple times a month. Because it uses a super inexpensive cut of meat. And my mom would usually buy it from the grocery store mechanically. It's already been mechanically tenderized, put through like a machine that chews it up. So I've got an enameled cast iron pan here, and I've put some bacon grease in the bottom. And to that I'm going to add chopped up onion, and we're just going to let that go. Not too high heat, low and slow for a little bit. Just want to soften and really kind of slowly brown those onions. Now, as we've talked about before, when you see Spanish in a lot of North American recipes, it's because it contains tomatoes. Not because it comes from Spain, but because it contains tomatoes. This is no exception. This one contains tomatoes. But there is a little bit of precedent. There are historically recipes that are very Spanish that do a similar presentation to this. And that's slippery. And that's partly because, really, the Spanish were the first Europeans to incorporate tomatoes into their cooking. And so they tried it in a lot of things. And then when it went out to the rest of Europe started using tomatoes and calling it in the Spanish style or Spanish whatever. That's what's going on here. My mom would have called this Swiss steak. And there are a lot of recipes where you see the overlap between Spanish steak and Swiss steak. They're pretty much the same. And when it comes down to it, almost all recipes that are Spanish steak are Swiss, because Swiss doesn't mean Switzerland. In this case, Swiss means that you have mechanically pounded the steak to tenderize it. I am Swissing this steak. So I've got a meat mallet, and I'm supposed to tenderize the steak. I'm also supposed to coat it in flour as I'm doing this. So there we go. A little bit of flour. The flour is going to get messy. Let's turn it over. Okay, so pounding a cup of flour into a pound of steak can be a little bit messy. A little bit of flour everywhere. I think it's going to be okay. Our onions are looking pretty good. So now, get the steak in there. Okay, so it says to turn once. I'm not really going to get much browning on the meat, because by the time I get browning on the meat, I'm going to burn the onions. So we're going to leave it at that. Now, it says to put in half a cup of tomato catsup or a cup of canned tomatoes. My mom used the stewed tomatoes that we would make every summer, or can every summer. So that's what I'm putting in now. Stewed tomatoes. And they're really flavorful. I mean, they're stewed with onions, peppers, celery, a couple of other spices in there at all times. It's a really flavorful tomato broth liquid. It's really good. And 2 cups of boiling water. So I'm supposed to boil this slowly for at least an hour. So simmer. I'm going to let this go at a simmer. Tells me that if the gravy starts to become too thick, to add a little bit more water. You don't want it to get too thick. Definitely something to keep an eye on. It doesn't say anything about a lid. I'm going to imagine that there is no lid put on the top. So I've got this set to 4. I'm going to come back every 5-10 minutes and look at it for the first little while and see how it's doing. See you for tasting. Okay. Okay, so the key to this is to slice it really thin because it can be pretty tough. Even though it's braised. Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends. Hey, Glenn. How you doing there?
So, Spanish steak.
Spanish steak. Okay. Okay. I never understand why it's named anything. I'm gonna start by doing a little dipping over here.
It has tomatoes, so often Spanish
Oh, it just means
means tomatoes.
That's right. I forgot.
There is a precedent. There is a actual steak dish in Spain that has a similar preparation, though this is a very simplified version of that.
That's really good on the bread.
And a little bit of the sauce over top.
The sauce is good. I liked it. Well, and my initial dip, anyway.
Okay.
Can I do this gracefully without dripping it down my chin? There's the question.
Probably not. Tastes exactly like my childhood.
Tomato and onions?
Tomato, onions. Well, my mom would make
Celery?
this all the time.
Oh, yeah?
She called it Swiss steak, but exactly the same thing. You know,
I feel like you could do this with almost the sauce, with almost any, like you could do it with chicken.
chicken, pork, beef, lamb.
No.
The key, though, is mechanically tenderizing the steak, right?
Ooh, you doing that today?
Yeah, I don't have a really good mallet, though. It didn't do a good job. There's one that a jacquard. If you had a jacquard, that would be perfect to do, to Swiss the steak. Okay, so a recipe from the 1920s that lives on today that was probably from the 1850s. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.